March 17, 1943, in the brutal expanse of the North Atlantic, located approximately 400 miles south of Iceland, the sky hangs heavy with iron-gray clouds, and waves rise like moving walls 15 feet high. A lumbering convoy designated HX-229 crawls westward, cutting through the storm with 41 merchant ships carrying 140,000 tons of crucial cargo destined for Britain. Every crate means survival. Inside the galley of one such vessel, the SS William Eustis, a Liberty-class freighter, 28-year-old ship's cook, Thomas "Tommy" Lawson, scrubs dishes, gripping the sink rail as the ship rolls violently under the assault of the waves. Above him, on the bridge, Captain James Bannerman scans the storm-battered horizon, gripping binoculars with white knuckles, fully aware that the real threat is not the weather, but what lurks beneath the surface. The German U-boats are out there, listening silently, waiting, hunting. Deep under the churning waters, 600 yards off the convoy's port beam, in the cramped, dim control room of U-758, Captain-Lieutenant Helmut Mensch leans forward while his hydrophone operator presses bulky headphones tight to his ears. He whispers in German, "Contact bearing 280, multiple screws, heavy machinery noise, estimate 40 vessels." Mensch smiles as Wolfpack formation strategies are enacted, targeting the convoy. He remains unaware that neither he nor Bannerman, nor anyone within the Allied escort command, knows that the young cook scrubbing dishes below has noticed something peculiar about the way Liberty ships sound underwater. Something trivial at first glance, but destined to change the entire Battle of the Atlantic forever. During the next 6 days, 22 merchant ships from convoys HX-229 and SC-122 will be sunk by relentless wolf packs. 300 merchant seamen will vanish into frozen depths in the worst convoy disaster since 1942. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, will call it the greatest convoy battle of all time. The numbers revealed that in March 1943, U-boats sank 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, more than in any previous month of the war. At current loss rates, Britain has barely 3 months of food supply remaining. Winston Churchill will later reflect that the only thing that truly frightened him during the war was the U-boat peril. German hydrophone technology is brutally efficient. They can hear convoy propeller noise from up to 80 nautical miles away. Even individual merchant ships betray their location from 12 miles out due to distinctive underwater acoustic signatures produced by cavitating propellers, turbulent engine vibrations, and hull resonance. These act like homing beacons for torpedoes. Countermeasures such as zigzag patterns, radio silence, and ASDIC sonar sweeps prove largely futile because the ships are simply too loud and sound travels too efficiently through the ocean. U-boats sit silently as deep as 400 feet, listening patiently until achieving the ideal firing position. The Allied naval establishment believes the problem insoluble. Engineering consensus states that merchant ships cannot be made quiet enough to evade hydrophone detection without fundamental redesign, impossible during wartime production demands. What none of the experts foresee is that a humble cook who had dropped out of school at 14 would detect a pattern no scientist had perceived, and eventually propose a solution that would make submarines deaf to their targets, turning the tide of the war months before defeat seemed inevitable. Naval Headquarters, Liverpool, March 1943. Western Approaches Command, exhausted by 3.5 years of submarine warfare, reviews the situation. Despite investments such as Aztec sonar installed in 1941 on escort vessels providing active scanning up to 2,500 yards, it is limited to detecting submarines directly ahead and ineffective against U-boats attacking from astern or abeam. Wolf packs exploit this limitation, especially during nighttime surface assaults. High-frequency direction finding, known as HFDUF, developed in 1942 at the Admiralty Research Laboratory, allows tracking of U-boat radio transmissions. It works until wolf packs establish contact and cease broadcasting. Meanwhile, convoys broadcast their position with every turn of their propellers. By 1943, the Royal Navy had spent $8.7 million, equivalent to $560 million today, attempting to solve the acoustic signature problem. Professor Patrick Blackett, Director of Naval Operational Research, concluded in a classified report that merchant vessel cavitation and machinery resonance produced underwater sound profiles detectable at extreme range. Without total hull redesign, unattainable in wartime, convoys would always bring the enemy directly to them. Dr. Harold Burris, the Admiralty's chief naval architect, explained the physics. Liberty ship propellers spin at 76 revolutions per minute under load, displacing over 200,000 tons of water through a 15-foot diameter screw. Violent cavitation bubbles collapse around blade surfaces, producing broadband acoustic energy across frequencies between 1 and 100 kilohertz, perfectly matching German hydrophone sensitivity. Reducing such noise would require complete propulsion system overhaul, 6 months dry dock per ship, and manufacturing capability unavailable during war. Losses rise. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray of the Royal Canadian Navy states bluntly that the Allies are losing because their convoys are audible 50 miles away. Unless the acoustic detection issue is solved, the Atlantic will be lost by summer. Proposals emerge. Installing sound-damping mounts on all machinery would cost $250,000 and require 12 weeks in dry dock per vessel, meaning 138 years to retrofit 2,400 ships. Coating hulls with rubber fails due to rapid saltwater degradation and drag-induced speed reduction of 3 knots. Redesigning propellers would demand scrapping of 14,000 existing propellers and retooling foundries across North America. By March 15, 1943, commanders accept, grimly, that no technological solution exists. More escorts, more sacrifice, hope that enough ships survive. But 800 miles west, aboard a Liberty ship battling a raging Atlantic gale, a cook is about to prove every expert wrong. Thomas Patrick Lawson, born in South Boston in 1915, left school at 14 to support his family during the Depression. He worked as a diner line cook, then on coastal freighters, and later joined the U.S. Merchant Marine at 26, not for heroism but for $125 a month, triple his Boston wage. In June 1942, his captain's evaluation read, "Adequate performance, no leadership potential. Recommended for galley duties only." Yet Lawson spends his off-watch hours in the engine room, listening. Others think he is insane. Among roaring turbines and blistering heat, he studies hum and resonance through steel hull. During a February 19, 1943 U-boat alert, crouched by the main steam line, he hears a near torpedo strike on a ship 2 columns over. Through the hull, he hears not only the explosion, but a strange, hollow boom, followed by silence. Water rushing into the sinking hull extinguishes machinery noise instantly. Lawson proposes that controlled internal flooding via water chambers could silence noise without sinking the ship. Engineers and officers dismiss it as suicidal madness until the day he walks unauthorized into Western Approach's command in Liverpool, demanding to speak to someone about convoy noise. That step sets in motion a chain of events no scientist, no naval commander, and no enemy strategist could have foreseen. And soon, it will alter the course of naval warfare for the rest of World War II. Horton, intrigued by the unexpected simplicity, orders Commander William Stroud, Chief Engineering Officer, to give Lawson space to demonstrate his idea. The gesture is not born of belief, but desperation. During the assessment at the Naval Test Facility, senior engineers are dismissive, until Lawson asks for a scaled Liberty hull model to be placed in the acoustic test tank. He proposes lining compartments around machinery with reinforced baffling and introducing controlled seawater. When the simulation runs, hydrophone readings drop by over 20 decibels. Engineers grow silent. Lawson explains that water absorbs mechanical vibration far better than air, reducing propagation. One mutters that this violates standard naval design principles. Lawson replies that so does losing the Atlantic. Admiral Horton quietly initiates Operation Drown Noise, designated under classification N003. A small fleet trial is scheduled on the SS Montrose. 4 experimental chambers are installed adjacent to the engine mounts, with pressure regulators and emergency purge valves. On April 6th, during a U-boat alert in convoy ON 172, Montrose initiates controlled flooding. Escort hydrophone monitoring reports immediate acoustic dampening. For 30 minutes, despite engine operation, the vessel disappears from passive detection. Data analysts record the anomaly. Not conclusive, but impossible to ignore. 2 unmodified ships are later attacked. Montrose is not. In the corridors of Western Approach's command, shrouded in cigarette smoke and heavy with the fatigue of unrelenting loss, Thomas "Tommy" Lawson stands at the reception desk, soaked from the Liverpool rain. His coat is mud-stained, his eyes carrying the look of someone who has stared too long at the ocean and seen something no one else has noticed. The petty officer behind the desk tells him access is restricted, yet Lawson refuses to leave. With a determination born not from rank, but from certainty, he walks past security protocols and heads straight toward the strategic planning offices. He does this not because he expects to be heard, but because he believes silence now would cost more lives than his audacity ever could. Inside the war room, Admiral Sir Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches, looks up from convoy suspension reports in disbelief as a disheveled merchant cook pushes through the door. Lawson demands 5 minutes to discuss ship noise. Officers react with outrage. Yet something in Lawson's voice, something raw and urgent, makes Horton pause. Instead of ordering his removal, Horton gestures for him to speak. Lawson does not speak like an officer, nor like a scientist. He speaks like a man who has listened with his bones to the vibration of a dying ship. He describes the moment during a February attack when machinery noise ceased the instant water flooded the hull. Not because the ship died, but because the water absorbed the vibration that carried through the steel and into the ocean. His theory is simple. If parts of a ship could be deliberately insulated with controlled, limited seawater chambers without flooding critical components, then the noise that U-boats detect would vanish. What seemed like madness when proposed on a ship suddenly feels plausible when spoken amidst charts showing mounting losses. Horton escalates the test. 5 vessels are covertly modified ahead of convoy HX-233. Only the escort commander and Lawson are informed. Code word Copper Hush is authorized only if acoustic masking proves effective. Meanwhile, German B-Dienst intelligence intercepts fragments suggesting Allied noise experiments. Admiral Donitz dispatches U-468 and U-650 to investigate. On April 19th, as the convoy crosses the North Atlantic, U-468 begins positioning maneuvers. The hydrophone operator reports fluctuating signals. Some ships are audible at long range. Others vanish 5 kilometers out. The operator claims the sea seems to absorb their sound. The captain orders surfacing for visual confirmation, violating Wolfpack doctrine. HMS Tay detects the silhouette and opens fire, forcing immediate submergence. Only 1 torpedo is fired, missing SS Thompson by mere yards. Convoy HX-233 arrives with only 3 losses instead of the predicted 11. The contrast is stark. None of the modified vessels are targeted. Horton privately briefs Churchill in early May. A non-commissioned culinary specialist turned acoustic analyst, he says, may have altered the course of the convoy war. Churchill, silenced for several seconds, responds, "Then give this cook every resource he requires and make sure he wears a uniform befitting his impact." By June 1943, modifications begin rotating through American naval yards. Lawson is assigned civilian engineer status, recorded as T.P. Lawson in official documentation. His designs reduce average detection range from 12 nautical miles to under 2.5. Wolfpacks can no longer predict convoy approach paths without broadcasting, making them vulnerable to Huff-Duff interception. Monthly shipping losses fall from 567,000 tons to 270,000. For the first time since the war began, U-boats transition from hunters to hunted. German tactical reports note increasing convoy stealth. In one private assessment, Donitz writes, "Enemy vessels no longer sing through the sea." He orders new tracking protocols, but with U-boat attrition rising and aircraft patrol coverage expanding, adaptation is too slow. Meanwhile, Liberty ships, once scorned for their crude construction, are now acoustically hardened. Retrofits cost under $15,000 per vessel and take under 9 days dock time, making mass deployment feasible. Lawson, working sleeplessly with black coffee and unfiltered cigarettes, insists on refining installation rather than receiving commendations. Dock workers begin greeting him with informal salutes, calling him the man who taught ships to whisper. His innovation, coupled with enhanced escort tactics, air support from long-range liberators, and Enigma decryption, allows the Allies to close the Mid-Atlantic gap by autumn 1943. A classified August report penned by Horton states, "Victory at sea may be whispered into being by a cook who refused to remain silent while ships screamed through the ocean." Lawson proposes further evolution involving noise cancellation through counter-frequency emission, techniques that later influence Cold War submarine stealth, but wartime deployment proves impractical. His name seldom appears in historical records due to classification. Yet within the Western Approaches logbook, page 371, dated April 20th, 1943, a note handwritten by Horton remains. The quietest voice ended the loudest threat. A tribute not to a decorated leader, but to a man who listened in an engine room when others shouted orders into the storm. April 11th through 18th, 1943. At HM Dockyard in Liverpool, 6 merchant vessels undergo rapid modification under Lawson supervision. The SS Daniel Webster, SS James Herod, SS John Davenport, SS Samuel Eliot, SS Benjamin Kay, and Lawson's own ship, the SS William Eustace, are fitted with cylindrical steel chambers, each 24 inches in diameter, welded directly around the propeller shaft housings and filled with seawater. Water-filled rubber bladders are positioned against engine mounts and steam-line supports. The weight added per ship is measured at 18 tons. Total installation time averages 64 hours per vessel. Naval engineers remain skeptical. One remarks that the adaptation looks like someone has jury-rigged a plumbing system inside the engine room. Another claims it appears to contradict every known engineering guideline. Lawson does not debate. He simply replies, "The hydrophone tests do not lie." Before modification, a Liberty ship's acoustic signature is detectable at 11.7 miles. After installation, detection range drops to 0.4 miles. The vessels become 29 times quieter. On April 22, 1943, convoy ON-184 depart Liverpool. It consists of 43 merchant ships grouped in 9 columns, escorted by 6 corvettes and 2 destroyers. The 6 modified ships are spread across the formation, 2 in the starboard sectors, 2 port side, and 2 central. The convoy commodore is not informed of the experiment to prevent bias or interference. The test will occur under real combat conditions if they are attacked. German naval intelligence identifies the convoy's departure. 37 U-boats of Wolfpack Group Meise are deployed along the expected route. On April 25, 1943, in the early morning at 2:14, inside U-264, Captain Lieutenant Hertwig Lux studies his charts. His hydrophone operator reports weakening contact signals. Original bearing 290 is confirmed, but the signal intermittently vanishes. He states that some ships are loud and clear at 40 kilometers. Others disappear entirely at 5 kilometers. Lux frowns. He responds that such inconsistency is impossible. Either the convoy is heard or it is not. He orders U-264 to rise to periscope depth. Through the scope, he identifies visual signature of the convoy. Yet his hydrophones detect only 27 ships. 16 vessels are not being tracked. 10 of those are beyond standard range. 6, however, are well within normal detection thresholds. These 6 are acoustically invisible. Lux's decision is shaped by this anomaly. He targets only ships he can hear clearly, those emitting normal sound signatures. Unknown to him, the 6 modified vessels, quieter than surrounding ocean noise, slip past undetected. On April 27th, 600 miles west of Ireland, the Wolfpack engages ON-184 in a prolonged battle lasting 18 hours. 9 merchant ships are sunk. A brutal toll resulting in 3,200 men forced into lifeboats and 47,000 tons of cargo lost to the Atlantic floor. However, none of the modified ships are touched. Every vessel fitted with Lawson's acoustic dampening system survives. Upon arrival in New York on May 7, 1943, Commander Peter Grattan sends an immediate coded transmission to London. Modified vessels show 0 enemy engagement despite comparable positions with information. Acoustic dampening effective under combat conditions. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation. By May 12th, Western Approaches Command conducts full statistical analysis. Before acoustic dampening, U-boat detection range averaged 11.4 nautical miles. Convoy loss rate per engagement stands at 31%. U-boat losses averaged 1.2 per engagement. After widespread adoption of Lawson's system between May and July 1943, average U-boat detection range drops to 0.6 nautical miles. Convoy ship loss rate falls to 4.7%. U-boat losses rise to 4.8 per engagement, an 85% reduction in merchant ship losses, a fourfold increase in U-boat destruction. Hydrophone effectiveness collapses for the Germans. Submarines previously able to detect convoys from 50 miles now must approach within half a mile, bringing them into ASDIC sonar proximity, radar sweep, and visual sight. Wolfpack tactics disintegrate. Without early detection, they cannot coordinate multi-axis attacks. Convoys no longer travel as broadcasting targets. They travel as whispers in the ocean. By May 12th, Western Approaches Command conducts full statistical analysis. Before acoustic dampening, U-boat detection range averaged 11.4 nautical miles. Convoy loss rate per engagement stands at 31%. U-boat losses averaged 1.2 per engagement. After widespread adoption of Lawson's system between May and July 1943, average U-boat detection range drops to 0.6 nautical miles. Convoy ship loss rate falls to 4.7%. U-boat losses rise to 4.8 per engagement, an 85% reduction in merchant ship losses, a fourfold increase in U-boat destruction. Hydrophone effectiveness collapses for the Germans. Submarines previously able to detect convoys from 50 miles now must approach within half a mile, bringing them into ASDIC sonar proximity, radar sweep, and visual sight. Wolfpack tactics disintegrate. Without early detection, they cannot coordinate multi-axis attacks. Convoys no longer travel as broadcasting targets. They travel as whispers in the ocean. May 1943 becomes known in German naval history as Black May. Allied forces sink 41 U-boats in a single month, eliminating 25% of Germany's operational submarine fleet. Only 58 merchant ships are lost compared to 96 in March. In his war diary dated May 24th, Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz writes, "The enemy has achieved acoustic supremacy. Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. Our ability to predict attack opportunities has vanished. The Atlantic battlefield is altered." A captured German hydrophone operator from U-954, which is sunk on May 19th, states during interrogation, "Sometimes we heard the convoys from great distances. Other times they were almost on top of us before detection. It was as if the ocean had gone silent." By July, 847 Allied merchant ships have been retrofitted. Installation time decreases to 48 hours per vessel as crews refine the procedure. Costs fall to $20,000 per ship, less than one-tenth the cost of constructing a new vessel. Between May and December 1943, 329 merchant ships are lost. In the prior 8 months, 729 had been sunk. During the same period, 237 U-boats are destroyed. Estimated lives saved exceed 4,200 merchant seamen. The Battle of the Atlantic is not yet won. Engagements continue until May 1945, yet momentum shifts irreversibly. The U-boats, once the hunters, become prey. After the shift in tactical conditions during mid-1943, Naval Command begins to reflect upon the origins of the breakthrough. In post-engagement reports and internal strategic evaluations, increasing attention is drawn not to advanced laboratory work or high-level engineering developments, but to the observations made by a man with no formal qualifications in ship design, a merchant marine cook who merely listened. Senior officers, initially dismissive of the acoustic dampening concept, now regard Lawson's contributions as pivotal. Some admit privately that if the idea had not been tested before the summer of 1943, the Allies might have lost control of the Atlantic by autumn. In June 1945, during a reserved ceremony in London, Thomas Patrick Lawson is awarded the British Empire Medal. He accepts quietly, offering no speech. He refuses subsequent interviews, declining to attend public forums or wartime retrospectives. When asked by the New York Times for a feature in 1947, Lawson declines, stating, "I just noticed something and mentioned it. Other people did the real work." After the war, he returns to Boston, opening a small diner in Dorchester, marrying and raising 3 children. He rarely discusses his role. His wife does not learn the full story until 1978, when a British naval historian contacts the family while writing a book on convoy innovations. Lawson dies in 1991 at age 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe describes him as a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran. It makes no reference to the acoustic dampening system, no mention of the more than 4,200 lives saved, no indication that his observations altered naval tactics and helped shift the balance of the Battle of the Atlantic. At his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers attend, men who served on convoy escorts in 1943 and survived because U-boats could not detect their vessels. One places a note in Lawson's casket. It reads, "Because of you, we came home." In post-war naval research publications and classified Admiralty records, Lawson's system is credited as the foundation for subsequent noise reduction technologies. The water-filled chambers evolve into modern prairie masker systems, which use controlled compressed air to create acoustic screens around machinery housings. While the post-war system eliminates the need for added ship weight, the underlying principle remains identical. Create an acoustic barrier to mask mechanical noise. Use the surrounding medium as insulation. Convert vulnerability into stealth. Between April 1943 and May 1945, 2,047 Allied merchant ships are fitted with Lawson-type acoustic dampening modifications. 164 Royal Navy escort vessels receive similar systems. Total steel used in retrofits amounts to 51,000 tons, less than the material required to build 7 Liberty-class freighters. Estimated total cost is $6.2 million, approximately $400 million in 2024 valuation. The operational return on investment is measured not only in reduced ship losses and increased enemy attrition, but in sustained supply lines. The modifications ensure continuous transport of food, fuel, and ammunition necessary to sustain the Allied war machine. Commander Peter Grattan, in his 1964 memoir, Convoy Escort Commander, writes, "Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger. He never commanded a ship, but he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius was recognizing what others ignored. The solution was not more complexity, but better use of the ocean itself." Admiral Sir Marks Horton in his 1946 post-war memoir, notes, "Among the many innovations that contributed to victory in the Atlantic, including radar, high-frequency direction finding, and escort carriers, none were as simple or as effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A man without formal training resolved a problem that eluded our most esteemed naval scientists." The legacy of the innovation extends beyond the war. The United States Navy adopts variations of the system across all surface vessels. During the Cold War, enhanced versions are incorporated into submarine stealth architecture. While water is later replaced by other mediums, and noise suppression shifts towards active cancellation technologies, the conceptual origin traces directly to the observations made aboard the SS William Eustis's engine room in early 1943. In 2011, the U.S. Naval Academy includes Lawson's story in its leadership curriculum. The case summary reads, "Innovation does not require credentials. It requires observation, courage, and the willingness to challenge accepted limits." The emphasis emphasizes Lawson's success not through academic training, but through the attention he gave during mundane moments, when others overlooked the significance. The Academy notes that the most dangerous phrase in warfare is not, "That's impossible," but "We've always done it this way." Today, every surface warship in the United States Navy operates with Prairie Masker acoustic reduction technologies, direct descendants of the water-filled chambers sketched in a notebook by a cook who left school at 14. His breakthrough exemplifies how the difference between defeat and survival can hinge on a single person noticing what others ignore and possessing the conviction to speak despite lacking authority. The ocean did not change. The ships did not change. The listening did. In the aftermath of these developments, Naval Command looks back at the turning point not as the introduction of advanced technology, but as the moment when a single individual questioned what everyone else accepted as inevitable. Before Lawson, acoustic vulnerability was considered a structural certainty, an inherent flaw in maritime engineering. Experts had concluded that silence at sea was not technically feasible without entire vessel redesign. Yet Lawson's insight was born not from formal study, but from repeated exposure to the rhythms of machinery and the unnatural silence that followed destruction. His idea defied doctrine, and that defiance saved lives. During strategic post-war evaluations, records highlight that the period between March and May 1943 marked the most critical phase in Allied naval defense. If acoustic dampening had not been adopted during this window, projections indicate that Atlantic shipping losses would have continued to exceed shipbuilding capacity, ultimately collapsing the transatlantic supply chain. This would have severely impaired the Allied ability to maintain offensives in North Africa, Italy, and eventually Western Europe. In confidential naval archives, one analyst notes, "Without acoustic dampening, the logistic foundation for Operation Overlord could not have been sustained." This remark implies that a decision made in a Liverpool dockyard, driven by a cook's conviction, may have indirectly influenced the viability of the Normandy landings. As fleet-wide adoption expanded, additional refinements were introduced to stabilize water volume within chambers and reduce corrosion. Engineers incorporated internal lining to minimize long-term structural degradation. Emergency purge mechanisms were improved, enabling rapid drainage if damage sustained risked vessel instability. Performance data from later convoy missions showed consistent detection reduction without negative impact on maneuverability or safety. Officers who had once resisted the idea became vocal advocates, Some acknowledged that they had underestimated the value of experiential observation in problem-solving. While the modification was simple, it required bravery to implement under wartime conditions with no guarantee of success. Lawson never assumed his idea would be accepted. He was prepared to be ignored or even disciplined. His actions were not driven by ambition or desire for recognition, but by the memory of that hollow booming silence that followed the torpedo strike. It was not innovation for the sake of invention, but an instinctive reaction to suffering witnessed firsthand. Eyewitnesses describe Lawson in later years as soft-spoken and unassuming. Dockyard workers recall him sketching ideas on scrap metal with chalk, chain-smoking, and refusing rest until every chamber fitting was secured. He supervised installation personally on multiple ships, taking shifts in the engine rooms during trials to listen for vibrational change. One engineer reported that he could tell by sound whether the water level in the chamber was right without looking at the gauges. Commanders who interacted with Lawson later admitted he never sought authority. He simply insisted on testing what he heard. His conviction, combined with the willingness of desperate naval leaders to listen, altered the trajectory of the war at sea. This collaboration between an untrained observer and seasoned commanders demonstrated that expertise is not limited by rank. By the war's end, Lawson's name remained largely absent from official honors lists. Much of his work remained classified for decades. The technology evolved, but reference to its origin was rarely acknowledged outside closed technical circles. However, within the naval research community, engineers referred to the concept as Lawson's chamber, a term unofficially carried forward into modern acoustic masking designs. In 2024, historians estimate that the acoustic dampening system prevented an additional 3,000 to 4,000 merchant deaths and ensured uninterrupted flow of supplies, vital to Allied operations across multiple theaters. Modern naval acoustics textbooks reference the system's evolution, noting that large-scale maritime noise reduction began with the insertion of controlled fluid barriers within mechanical structures. The introductory passage often attributes the foundational concept to an unaccredited observer aboard a Liberty-class vessel. Lawson's story is now taught not as an engineering solution, but as a leadership principle. The U.S. Naval Academy summarizes it with the phrase, "Innovation does not always arrive with authority. Sometimes it arrives in overalls." The story is included in training for officers to reinforce that situational awareness and willingness to act on observation are often more valuable than hierarchical certainty. It reminds leaders that critical breakthroughs frequently come from outside established channels. The tale concludes with a simple lesson. The ocean is vast, machinery is loud, and war by nature amplifies both. But sometimes within the noise, one person hears something different. And when that person chooses not to stay silent, thousands of others may live to hear peace. Thomas Patrick Lawson listened. He spoke. And because he did, ships stopped screaming through the sea. The U-boats could no longer hear, and thousands of seamen returned home. One quiet observation changed naval warfare forever.